I can't speak for anyone but myself. For me, I have a very, very specific tone in the main guitar that I use. And I have, many copies of that guitar. It's a signature model. So it's also, it's being made more than once. So I often am finding that I need to break away from that tone specifically. And there's certain guitars that just, they do different things, but I'm in sort of swap in and out mode right now. There's a couple of guitars that have just not been played for a while that need to find new homes. And then there's certain things that I'm like, well, I mean, I'm never going to let go of that because that's one of a kind or completely amazing or, but I think it's mainly like the guitar is a tool of inspiration, right? So you pick it up and you want it to speak. And, some of the ones I have, they've done that for years. And some of the ones I have are like, nah, we need to be in someone else's hands. So we'll see.
Are you kind of naturally prone to guitar hoarding to some degree? I mean, I say this as somebody who has like a ridiculous number of books in his New York City apartment. So, well,
look, listen, there's a really, really easy way to answer this, which is, how many guitars do you need? How many guitars does anyone need? Do you know how many? There's a standard answer to this.
Is it one or?
No, it's one more.
It sounds like you're doing better. I assume since I'm in Queens, you're in Brooklyn. I assume that you're dealing with similar spatial constraints where you live.
The truth is that if something sits in a case for too long, it's like RuPaul says, if you haven't worn it in a year, get rid of it. It's the same thing with guitars. If you haven't played it in a long time, it's not serving any purpose. There's certainly someone else out there that could use it. So, pass it on. So I'm trying to make that happen.
Do you tend to just have like one specific one in rotation for a while? Or are you going out of your way to switch between them?
No, here's the thing. I have this signature guitar with Ovation, and it's been my main guitar since day one of my career, for sure. That is the go-to, and that's the thing that you hear on all the albums. And so everything else is like complementary or in conversation or whatever with that guitar. So it's something that either breaks out of that sound or makes that sound interesting to come back to on an album or in a live set. So the other guitars that I use typically aren't just straight up normal 6 strings. They've kind of, sometimes they're 12 strings or they're tiny 12 strings or they're an electric or a Weissenborn. So anyway, something that just breaks out of that tone.
What is that process like of finding, I guess, what your signature tone is? I mean, the closest thing I can kind of think of is like, I talk to a lot of stand-up comics, and it takes like years and years for them to really refine what their delivery style is. It's very much the same, especially when you're an instrumentalist. It's like, you can't define it. You know it when you see it. It's like with a comic, you might read a tweet or a joke. You think, I bet that person wrote that. And you can't really explain why or break it all down. It just has their voice. And I think that, similar in music and in instrumental music and instrumental composition, that's very similar. Like no one else would do that. Or that's a phrase I've heard before. Or that's a tone or a tuning or some kind of, all the subtleties, the type of guitar, the type of strings, are you playing with nails or not? How kinds of what kind of finger picking you're doing, and that all the little tiny things add up to create your own voice. Is it an active act though of searching for something that is uniquely your own tone?
I think so, because I mean it takes years, and we talk about tone, and I'm really referring to timbre. What we really want to speak about is composition. How do you distinguish your writing style from everyone else's? And so that goes into, it begins with the sound of your guitar and goes from there. So it's, delivery, aggression, subtlety or not, it's all like the weird kind of balance. Timing is a big one, and, and all of the above. And so as far as the practice, it's weird. I find that for me, I worked my whole life to be in a place where you could listen to a song and know it was me without opening my mouth, that you could, that was part of what I wanted to build as an artist, was an instrumental guitar player among all kinds of fantastic guitarists in the world, where you could actually go, I think that is her tune. The result is that now that I've gotten there, I have to now I have to now break out of it and do something else, because, to me, I don't like repeating myself too often.
You described it, I guess, similar to prose writing style. And I assume within a certain tone, within a certain style, you still have a fair amount of freedom, right? I mean, you're still able to express yourself in different ways, and you're still able to reinvent yourself. But it sounds like you are you, I mean, is it specific to now, or is it something that's been ongoing throughout your career where you felt the need to really find a way to break out of that?
No. I think that, I think it was Russell Simmons that said to the Beastie Boys when they were like going from a punk band to a hip hop band, like, just do it. You're going to sound like you. I mean, there's something inescapable about us all. We can't just become things that we're completely not. So I think when you, as an artist, let's say that I'm going to go from being a guitarist and I'm going to spend the rest of my life, playing the piano. Like, there's just a lot of things on the piano I would never be able to do because I'm me. I'm limited by my humanity. And it's not that I would translate all that I play on the guitar to the piano. It's just that I'm just, my example just means that you are, in a sense, already doing yourself before you even know it. And that can be part of, for a musician, that could be part of your anatomy. Like, you're a big person, you like fat strings on your bass, whatever, so you set yourself up in advance. Like, there's just a lot, sometimes there's choices and sometimes there's just things that you wouldn't do. So there's a process of elimination. And I think that it just goes and goes and goes until you're kind of settled, and then you break out of it and do something different. And then everyone gets mad at you and they're like, we like the old stuff.
Do you feel like you're at a more of a crossroads now than usual when it comes to trying something different?
I like trying new things. And I'm found in a lifelong process of, I put myself into difficult, uncomfortable situations, and there's growth. And not always, sometimes it's just horrible and we axe it and don't go back there ever again. But a lot of times it's like, put down the acoustic and pick up the electric. And sometimes it's, put down the normal acoustic and put it on stands and paint it white and project onto it, or take away the pedal board and start using plugins in your laptop. All these things that I really don't love doing. I find that are places that lead to better futures and change. And there's something funny. When I was younger, before my career was doing anything, I worked at a club. I worked at the Mercury Lounge, actually. And, and so I was working at a music club, and then I was playing music, and then I was going, and all my friends were musicians. So it was just, I saw a lot of music. And it would always baffle me personally. Like, I thought I was just missing something when people be like, oh, well, that band sounds just like that other band, so let's go, we're going to love them. And I'd be like, and really, I don't think this is common or normal, but I'd be like, but I just want that one. I'm done. I don't need to hear the same thing over and over. I'm seeking out new things, even when it like hurts me and everyone around me. So that was kind of like, but I ultimately, it's not really up to me to say whether I did or did not successfully apply this to my own career, because, I didn't know I was having a career until 10 years into it. But I did I didn't want to make the same album over and over again. I knew that. So I tried not to do that.
It sounds like some of these kind of these scenarios, it's like 201 that you described, these purposeful exercises and discomfort, I guess, were in fact uncomfortable, that like you didn't particularly enjoy the processes of executing on them.
Depends. At some point I had to, for instance, I started playing lap steel around my second album, and I was really, really bad at it. Like, I really did not get it. And I mean, my managers used to leave the room. Like, they would leave the venue when I broke that thing out. The truth is that in 2004, I had my second album made. It was coming out. I had done some television, but I was still completely unconvinced that anyone would have a career in solo guitar playing. No, and I don't even know that anyone around me was like, whoa, you're going to shoot, we're going to go straight to the moon here. I mean, it was really like, okay, we'll see what happens next. That was fun. So any little thing that happened, or any big thing, it was like, wow, that's just crazy. That shouldn't be here. That shouldn't be happening. So I never had a lot of major pressure coming from like my team to exceed any goal or do something like that. I had a lot of freedom to explore is what I'm saying. And that is a huge blessing, and I'm really grateful for it. So in a way, it was maybe built into the process. I was already someone that didn't want to hear the same thing twice if I didn't have to. But I was also someone who didn't really have any idea of what the length of what was happening at the time was going to be. So I just kind of went with it. I just did what I wanted.
Did I hear that right? You were actually playing the lap steel at shows in front of people in spite of the fact that you couldn't really play it? Totally. Sounds terrifying.
Well, sure. But like, if it doesn't matter, if there's, you know what I mean? If there are no consequences, it's not, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't like, okay, and then I did play bad lap steel a number of times on big stages. I can probably name a few, but I just wanted to do it. And again, I really never ever thought that this would be my life. It's been an enormous blessing. That is the blessing. If I had known, if you told me at 22, hey, this record contract you're signing for zero money or whatever is going to be the thing you're going to do for the next 20 years, get ready, I would have been like, screw you. It just wasn't, that was not part of my career building decision was, don't embarrass yourself with a crazy, nauseating instrument.
The expectations on 2004 Kaki and expectations on 2020 Kaki are very different now that you have actually built a career and you have a family now. Do you find that now that those, to some degree, those expectations are pretty firmly in place, that it has made it more difficult to be as experimental?
No, I think actually the expectation is that I should be experimental. And I love my fans and I connect with them and we get each other, but I don't ever need to do anything to please anybody. And, if I did, I wouldn't be where I am. I think I had to, I don't know. I mean, like, what am I supposed to do? Go and take a poll about how this tune should sound or how much we should compress this guitar? I mean, it doesn't really work like that. And a lot of it's not up to me personally. It's up to the guitar and the day and the humidity and the vibe and all this, weird stuff that you can't really define, but like is how music is created often. So many factors are not under my direct control.
Let's talk about some of these external factors. I mean, it sounds like much or most of the most recent record was already written by the time all of this really started happening in earnest, the quarantine and everything else. How much of a tangible effect, though, did COVID and everything else around it ultimately have on the songs themselves?
The timeline was really interesting because we started March 2nd. That was day one of the studio, and we were going to work fast. And when I say we, it was myself and Chloe Thompson and Arjan Miranda, and they live at their studio. They are partners. So we get into the studio and I start laying down guitar tracks. We start mapping out how this is going to work and listening and talking. And then there's like this coronavirus that's in the news. But that first week, there were some cases and things were happening when we started, but we made a good progress that first week. And that weekend I recorded some, and there's a party on March 7th for my kid's school that I went to, I played at. And, I remember the organizers being like, I mean, we're going to have hand sanitizer, but I don't know. I hope people still come. Like, I hope no one's scared away by these rumors. And, keep in mind, this is not us. This is not anyone. This is just not having information.
Like, for the record, I was putting on a big event for work in Berkeley on March 3rd. And all of this stuff it's crazy in hindsight, but obviously it happened really slow and really fast all at the same time.
I think when you really look at it, it happened really fast. But the first week what did happen, okay, I'll just mention these things that touched the record. First of all, we all lost a ton of money that first week because things were being canceled. And it was very, very stressful. I lost a lot of gigs because it was like, well, clearly we can't have a big gathering like tomorrow. So that's not going to happen. Anyway, week 2 was really, really bad. It meant that going into the studio and listening to mixes and was like the safe world, and then stepping outside and getting on our phones and finding out what's going on and the new rule and the new thing and the new case, and I mean, it was like, so it was this very weird alternate reality of being in the studio where like, hey, this music sounds good, but there was clearly a lot of things starting to come into the studio. So I wrote a few songs in the studio that really definitely, Sanitized and Alone is one of them that really was affected by the mood. And of course, some of the titles came around, Can't Touch This or That, or You, or My Face was probably the highlight. And then the city went into full lockdown, and we decided that even though they were like right down the street, this is no longer safe. And the last night where we had gone, we did a final mix, separated. And like the last song that we were working on, it was done. We were signed off on it. And I get a text, and Chloe says, Arjan has a fever. And I was like, oh, ho-hum. Great.
Was that your first instinct when you heard somebody had a fever that it was COVID?
No, I was like, oh, please, buddy. And then, yeah, so we all got COVID, which, wasn't great.
No, it's not ideal.
I mean, whatever. Someone tested positive. Everyone had antibody tests, etc. And I couldn't taste or smell, and it was very sci-fi and weird. So that's kind of the weird story of making the album, is that it was made like it was how they make those weird documentaries about like those 2 weeks or that 1 month or that, I feel like it was like that. It was like, leading up, the lead up really is what it was. And yeah, so that's the album story. And, certain things also, the song Say, I had created a new show called Say, which is 6 in Italian. And I had done it with a friend of mine who is heavily, heavily pregnant. And we'd actually performed it on leap year day. So February 29th, 2020. So like, imagine February 29th, I'm screaming into the face or leaning in, breathing heavily into the face of a pregnant woman while playing guitar, We decided, all of us, that it wouldn't be safe for her to come. So Say is a song of 5. It's meant to have sort of 2 people playing and surrounded by different guitars on stands. Well, it ends up just being me. And not really sure that I could pull it off. And I went in there and I kind of just messed around a couple times, and they took some takes, and I was like, I don't know, guys, I'm not really feeling this. And they're like, no, it's perfect. Leave it. We're moving on. Things
weren't great before COVID happened. It wasn't like everything was smooth sailing, and then all of a sudden this thing happened.
Not.
More so than usual, I would say, over the past, 3.5 years or so. How much of a marked effect do you think ultimately those sort of externalities have on the music that you make?
I don't know how to answer that anymore. I used to write music when I had a breakup, and write music when things were bad or hard or sad. And now I know that all of that stuff it's all an inside job. Like, I actually do have some control over my own personal well-being. And I'm not talking about, don't be sad or depressed. I'm not saying that it's just more like, whatever is affecting me is kind of my shit. And I have a lot better handle on that as a older, wiser person. That said, there is still plenty of stuff to get really, really, really effing bummed about all the damn time. So my music and my work and whatever, it's not of the time, it's not for the time, it's to escape the time. That has how music's always functioned for me. It's never brought me into focus of exactly what, it's never done anything but like clear the weeds and maybe knock a thought loose that helps me get to a solution. So that's what my own music kind of does for me when I play it or record it. It's just there, and it just sits and doesn't, it's not, I'm not trying to push anybody or really frankly say anything. I'm kind of trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to allow my brain, your brain, whoever likes it, that space for nothing to be occupied, for, the mind to wander, and suddenly like, oh, I know how to solve that problem, or, oh, need to call my congresswoman, or, oh, I need, like just like bringing into clarity. And I think that music can do that. I think gardening can do that. I think running or swimming, there's plenty of things that do it. But for me, I use music. And so I don't really know what it's about.
If one of the primary objectives, or at least kind of the happy consequences of it, is that it is meditative for people, it must be difficult to choose a title, right? Because that's the first thing that people see, and that's the thing that people associate with it.
Oh, yeah. And there's a very strong impetus to have that title reflect something in the song, and then there's a story, obviously, and then you're, like making things up that weren't really intended to be there. Yeah, naming instrumental music is a very big challenge. One that I'm not great at, but I do my best.
Is it almost a red herring sometime? Are you throwing people off the scent?
There is no scent, really. There's no intention. Honestly, if there was, I don't think I would try that. But no, it's really like, hopefully it's evocative and it works. It's kind of like being in a museum and going into a room and there's two things and it's sort of work together, maybe, hopefully. It's okay if they don't. They're still two distinct things.
It's not a case where it's, where it's like an afterthought, where the time comes and you have to create a track listing.
That is literally exactly what it is.
Oh, that is what it is. Okay. No, fair enough.
The time comes, I got to make a track listing. I have, everything is a temporary title. Everything's like, song in, B tuning, final number 12. And that's the WAV. And then I make it, it's all, pressure and deadlines are really helpful in those circumstances when you have to do something that I find tedious and boring, and, but also like, am I going to regret this?
What's an instance of a time that it was just like this was a terrible thing to name this song, or that it's like saddled the song with the name?
Now it's just like, I don't even hear it anymore, but there's certainly been some weird ones. Like, I have a song, I have an album with a song called First Brain, and then I named a song Second Brain. What?
Companion pieces.
What does that mean? What's happening?
What's an example of a time where it was serendipitous? What's a time where those two things have really played off each other really well?
Gonna have to bring up my Spotify.
It was funny because I was listening to some interviews that you were doing a while ago for this album specifically, and you were like, I can't remember who it was with, but you were struggling to come up with the names of the songs you were about to play. I think you had to pull out a sheet of paper to find the track listing.
That was either a very new, I think that probably happened when I had named the songs in March. And normally, I think it was from the new record, and I think I know what you're talking about. Normally you would name your songs, master them, get the artwork together. You'd be working on this. These titles would be there. It wouldn't just be that one day that you named them all and then you sent them and then the whole world shut down. So I think that's what happened, is normally the new title that would replace Rain Song or Streets or whatever the thing that you were doing at the time, like Pasta Song. They, and so I made these song titles, and then I, completely, they were obliterated from my brain because of 2020. So yeah, I think normally I wouldn't be that senile. It's just that I didn't spend a single day with these. I never wrote a set list. I never emailed anyone, they weren't released yet. So, well, thank you for calling me out on my early onset.
It seems like there is kind of a disconnect where especially if it's kind of a placeholder at some point in the process. Rain Song, Street Song, Pasta Song, because I feel like those are specific examples. I know that there was I think it was a track named after a street that was very specifically like the process Carmine Street. Mm-hmm. And it's really just like, isn't it? It's like the rhythm of you walking down the street.
That was that was roughly the tempo of me, like, doing my rounds when I lived over there. Yeah.
When you think of that street and that place and that time of your life, it's very evocative for you and the things that were going on. Having a specific tempo in real life and using that as kind of the skeletal structure for a song, is that common for you in your process?
It's hard, right? I think that it's hard to bring in something that specific to a song over and over. And I know people do it, and it's amazing, and they talk about where they were and their inspiration. But, you know, to me, it's like, it doesn't matter. Do I care? Do I need it? Can I not put my own place and my own inspiration? How can I situate myself? See, that's why I like to have as little context as possible, because I want people to have freedom to just have that thing be whatever it is. Like, you know, let's say they're listening to a beautiful song and they feel really, really great about the fact that they're about to go put their cat down. I don't even know, like some terrible example. And then they're like, but the song title is I Love My Cat. And it's like, well, I do love my cat, but I still have to take it to the vet and it's time. I don't know. This is all very dark and weird. My point is that I just don't like anything. I don't like planting ideas in people's heads. It's much better to just have it be as open as possible. But yeah, but then on the other hand, there's really no way to deny that, you know, your life is going to influence your work. It's just what part of your life.
Part of it is just like for you specifically, I assume that your music is evocative just because you remember where you were and what you were doing in that time of your life. You know, I mean, is there a sense of these kind of being like, you know, portals to the time when you wrote them or first played them?
Some of them, there's at least one on each record. There's at least one, you know, and there's at least one title, generally speaking, that refers to a thing. Night After Sidewalk, Doing the Wrong Thing, Ahuvati, So Much for So Little, Everything Has an End, Even Sadness. Ugh. A little bit less so in my later work. This is a little bit more. King Paisel, that was my sister's wedding. She married Sean Paisel, and it was the King Paisel wedding. So, you know, yes and no, but we're talking one tune off of, you know, 10 different records now. Definitely not In the Neck Is a Bridge to the Body, because that was like written to a script. But, you know, this latest one, though, I mean, Teak, Godchild, Rhythmic Tiny Sandball Patterns, Final State, Sanitized Alone, Can't Touch This or That, you know, all of those had a lot of meaning, but I hope it's open enough so that it doesn't influence what it does to you. Are you concerned then that talking too much about the specifics of a given song or what influenced it will influence the way that people interact with it? I think I think people look at it as a set of instructions, and it would be misleading to give people a guide that isn't actually there or isn't necessary. If the music needed footnotes, you would get footnotes. I just hope that it doesn't. In the case of a song, though, that's named after, you know, your wife or your kids, obviously there's a lot of pressure on that song to be a good song, I would assume. Listen, I've only named one song after one kid, and that was only because I had two songs prior to that named after. So Jessica, who I'm married to, I wrote that song when I was 15 years old and recorded it at 25 and didn't meet her till I was in my 30s. And then Bowen Island, which is my son, Bowen Island was like an island in Canada, and a friend was living there, and I like literally did that thing where I go like, oh, hey, here's my new track. And I went bowenisland.mp3 because you're there, and that's the name of the song. I've never even been there. But I ended up naming my son Bowen. So my daughter didn't have one, and so I used to call her Teak. So I named a song Teak. But like, who cares? That it's like, you know, let Teak take you wherever you need to be. Don't worry about my kid. She's 6 and she's fine. You know, like if Teak is a very different objective for you emotionally, let's do it. I mean, both of your kids are pretty young. How are they contextualizing all of what's happening? Like, do they understand how weird this all is? Yes, but also when they say kids are resilient, man, they are. My son is he's 3, so he's really not going to have a memory of this moment, I don't think. My daughter is 6, and, you know, she was in school, and then suddenly she wasn't. And she had a lot of bad meltdowns that ended in, I miss my friends. You know, she's a very, very social child. And so she is fine, and, you know, things have changed, and they're both attending school again, and they both have their friend, and life appears normal, but, you know, occasionally she'll be like, hey, let's go do that. And I'm like, honey, there is no that anymore. She's like, all right, coronavirus. You know, normally we'd be having a huge Halloween party. This year we're having a social distance outdoor setup that's going to be fun, but, you know, but she's a lot more used to it, and they adapt, and we all do and did. But, you know, keep in mind too, we're many, many months into this. And my worry is that this will start to become normal, that she won't, she was 5.5 when this started. Will this be the thing that she remembers as life being? And then how long does it stay? And when we change out of it, is that going to be the change for her? That's the weird thing. I don't know. I can only speculate, but you know what? They're happy kids. They're fine. They love each other. I really probably worry more than I should.
How have you adapted? I mean, it sounded like the album was largely or pretty much basically finished by the time the shit really hit the fan here.
Yeah, it was done. But also, think back too. It was like, oh, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks. Oh, this is going to, we didn't know. Well, we didn't know. And so there was no coming out of making the album. I still was like, let's get this mastered. Let's get these titles done. And then it became within a month very clear. Well, I was sick too, so I had to get better. But then, it became clear that this was not going to be a short period of time. So yeah, I got to say, I was really grateful. I finished. So the show that all these tunes come from is called Data Not Found. And that was a new kind of theatrical, technological guitar performance, if you will. I completed that in November of last year. And then I went straight into creating this other show that I mentioned, Say, with my friend, and this duo guitar kind of movement thing that it was really, an experiment, but we had enough to do a show and to debut it. And then I made an album, and I felt very creatively full by that point. And the fact that the album really, the fact that we finished it, it was done. There was no loose ends. I think made going into this time period a lot easier, because there wasn't a need to do something in this time period, right? Like prove myself. And there wasn't a need to try to fix something or, make something happen that really was going to be far too difficult. So I was able to get out of my own head, as they say, and focus on my family. But not gonna lie, it was a huge life adjustment. I've never, ever in my adult life been home this long.
There's also the very practical financial part of it all, of being a touring musician. Are you able to, as somebody who makes a living off her music, were you able to adapt? Are you able to find kind of other things in and around music that you're able to help pay the bills?
No. If you hear of anything, no, it's dark, man. I don't want to, freak out too badly, but it's hard. It's dark. It's not great. My wife is working. We work, when you go from a double income household to a single income overnight, it's tricky. So yeah, with 2 kids and this feeling that there may be no way out for you for a very, very long time. So I am trying not to go there. I'm trying to focus if I have any pity or self-pity, I really try to refocus that on people who never got the chance. Like, can you imagine and again, we all musicians, we think we're very special, but we're certainly not. But anyone who is this was going to be their year, anyone who was going to break through, anyone that was going to start that business or make that record or go on that tour, anything. And what do you do? How long do you wait? How long do you wait before you go, I'm going to get that online degree, or I'm going to put this away, or I'm going to sell that synthesizer? Like how do you operate? And the pain of that. And so a lot of my time has been spent reflecting and being really effing grateful that I got to do it in the first place for 20 years. If it doesn't come back, I will be okay. But for the people for whom it never happened and it should have, that messes me up. I mean, on the issue of making money, the Lord will provide.
In the 20 years that you've been doing this, and it sounds like all or most of it in and around New York City, which is obviously a very difficult place to make a living doing anything, let alone playing music. Did you ever get to that point where you felt like this path wasn't going to work out for you?
No. In fact, that's the similar to what I mentioned earlier, that was this blessing. So there was no path. There was no career. There was no, I'm going to play solo guitar for my life. That's just not a thing. if I had been like, okay, I want to be a pop star and I want a record and I want a tour and I want to sing, I can totally understand we can talk about the path. But at the time, it was a freaking fluke. And, you know, that's really important to remember, because it wasn't as if I was like living in New York City, like, yeah, like this. I mean, New York City handed my career to me on a platter with a bow tie on it. It literally, like, there was no, and I hate to say this, it's like if you wrote a bad Hollywood movie about like some chick playing guitar and some manager guy stumbling in the bar and buying a beer and seeing her and like talking to her and being, I want to manage you, and then managing her for 12 years. And like, you know, that was my story. That is what happened. So there was no like, this city can break you down and spit you out and destroy people. But it did the opposite for me. Yeah. But keep in mind though, it wasn't as if I was like, okay, like what's the next move? How am I going to make rent? And how am I going to do that? I was just like, well, when this is all over and, you know, a couple months from now, I'll go to grad school. It wasn't like there was no need or push or like super ingrained desire. I was already playing guitar. I'd already been playing guitar my whole life. I already had that, you know, that gift was given to me at a really young age through my dad. And so, you know, and I'll play guitar forever too. And COVID's not going to stop me from being a guitar player. That's not going to go away.
Do you get the sense now in hindsight that it was the fact that you were this weird anomaly that was a key to that? Because you could have been in one of like 8,000 4-piece indie rock bands and we never would have heard you again.
That is precisely how it happened. The anomaly factor gave me very little competition. I think competition is really healthy, but in terms of, you know, a rising tide would lift all the boats. But I really was just so standalone, especially at that time, that it was just like, wow, and she gets another gig and there's another gig and there's another tour, and how about another record? How about another record? Why don't you change that up a little and go out with a band? And it just kept going. You know, there was never a moment till now I didn't have a tour date. It was just easy people were like, oh, that one person playing guitar that's not a singer-songwriter, sign me up.
Anecdotally, between the years of 2004 and 2010, I saw a lot of, I was writing about music, and I saw a lot of bands. I saw a lot of opening bands, and I saw you open for John Darnielle, and I remember that like that.
There you go.
You know, I mean, I'm sure I saw 800 other indie rock bands open for the Mountain Goats over the years, and they've just not for lack of quality, but that they've all just kind of like faded away. And the fact that you were so different and that you were doing, you know, I remember very specifically like you using your guitar as a percussion instrument at the time, and that jumped out at me. Yeah.
I think that being a new idea. No, I'm not a new idea. I'm recycling ideas that people have had about guitars for years, and I'm you know, very good at taking players who I admire and learning their stuff and going from there. And that's kind of what I was doing earlier on. But it was just that solo guitar as a concept, I mean, it was really popular in the early 80s, and it's much more popular now. It just wasn't around at that point. So yeah, but I think the most valuable thing to learn from that was that like I missed that level of gratitude, you know, because now I'm like, oh, they want me to do what for what? And back in the day, I would have done, I try to always say, I will do, if you will feed me, I will do that gig.
You miss the level of your own gratitude.
I miss the level of my own gratitude. I miss the level of my own taking nothing for granted, because that's exactly how it was in the beginning. Because I started playing in the subway, and from the subway, someone was like, hey, you should make a CD. And I made a CD so I can sell it in the subway. This is all after 9/11 when I didn't have a job. I guess my point is that just, it kept me out of my own way, because there was never any like there was always a plan B. Plan B was to go work for my parents or to go figure out elsewhere. The fallback position was not hard to imagine, because this was not the path.
If we're looking for silver linings of the current moment, it's that, you know, I'm sure that as much as you like what you do, I'm sure that there are a lot of times where touring has just been grueling and a nightmare, and you know, you didn't want to play shows, and obviously spending a year or so out of it, you've had bad shows, or you've had rough nights, you know, things have.
Here's the thing. Yes, I've had shows where like people didn't turn up, but like playing guitar, for anyone. It's fucking awesome.
You never took that for granted.
No. If one person drives, look, especially now, we are so spoiled for choice. It's crazy. And the fact that someone chose me over Netflix, you know, Instagram, any number of amazing restaurants that are everywhere now, food had suddenly music stopped competing with streaming. I mean, illegal downloads, and had to start competing with food. And no one talks about this, but like, I don't know how old you are, but like when I was growing up, I'm 41. No one young cared about food, like at all. And I mean, I'm talking about people in their 20s, and all of a sudden you've got like, you know, it's the choice whether I go see a band play or an artist, or I like go to that cool restaurant that everyone's talking about. I mean, it was like so there's so much competition. So if anyone chooses me and I get to play guitar, that's the best. That is the effing best. The travel, the exhaustion, the where am I? Like, you know, I'm very good at that. I'm fairly used to it. But no, I could sell that. That could go away in a heartbeat. But playing guitar for people is awesome. And a bad show is just as bad as I want it to be.
You seemed like you were trying to make a concerted effort to be more grateful, but it doesn't sound like it's been a problem.
I don't usually have an amount of nostalgic or reflective gratitude. I'm usually like, okay, you know, here we are, the moment's good. We're okay, and let's be thankful. But I mean, I got to go to some crazy places. I got to see the world. I've been to Australia 12 times. Like I've scuba dived the Great Barrier Reef more than once, and I wrote that off. I mean, like, you know, I've really gotten to, like, I really got to do it in big ways and small ways and everything in between. And so I'm reflecting these days. And again, you know, for the people who really deserved it and didn't get it, and they're now choosing a different path like that, I don't know. I really obsess about that.
You didn't take for granted the process of making music or the fans or the people that listen to it, but maybe you took for granted some of the places it brought you.
There you go. Yeah, because you're right. The whole thing about touring is like, oh, I'm tired. Oh, it sucks. And it does. It's a lot of not seeing stuff. But then there's a lot of seeing, and there's a lot of opening up to different people in an audience every single night. I've never had a gig so bad that I wouldn't do that again. You know, I've never had a gig, I've never been on stage and it's been so awful that I think to myself, I would never repeat this. I know I'm lucky for that too.